Welcome to MetalNet TV. My name is Sarah, and today we're talking to drummer Quinton Kufahl. But before you do, make sure that you're subscribed to MetalNet TV. Hey, Quinton, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? It's
I'm
great to be
doing
here.
well. It's great to have you on. So let's just start at the beginning. I was, on Instagram and I'm just looking at all these videos, not necessarily people I follow, just whatever Instagram has for me. And I found the coolest like drum solo. And it's this young guy with this like cool hair and like doing all these cool tricks. And it just really caught my attention. And it just so happens that that was you. So first of all, let me just say I'm completely enamored with that clip, as I think you know by now because I've shared it many, many times. Um,
Mhm.
but what was that solo from? What was that video from?
So that clip is from November 2023, and that would be my second tour with a band that I perform with called Halocene.
Mhm.
We were in Europe, and I wish I knew. I think we were in Austria,
Mhm.
and I want to say it was the first night of the tour. I had not been to Europe at this point,
Mhm.
and that was a huge bucket list moment for me. And the band had hired a videographer to attend a couple different dates. So he got the drum solo. And first night, right out of the gate, aside from forgetting, I usually will hairspray
I love it.
my hair when I throw a stick and then play one handed, but I've had forgotten the hairspray, so that's why we have a little like I don't know what I'm doing here, but uh, it's in my opinion, a pretty magical moment for someone who is experiencing Europe for the first time. And the audience seemed to really like it based on the end of the clip. So I'm really proud of it. Um, and that's kind of like the origin of it for sure.
That's awesome. No, and I love that you had a professional videographer there that night because the video is pristine. Like it's a beautiful clip of you playing, and I feel like you really get it. You're not missing anything. You're not like searching around or wishing they had caught a certain thing. So I think it was just meant to be that that moment was meant to be captured. So let me just go there because for me, like I was introduced to metal and heavier rock through like 80s glam metal because I am a child of the 80s and that. And I think what struck me about your solo and your whole style and your hair and everything was that it really evoked that sense of excitement that I felt like when I was 12 years old, hearing it for the first time or the 100th time. Are you at all influenced by that, or is it just a coincidence that that kind of look evokes that for some of us?
I'm certainly influenced by it. Uh, Getting into music in my teenage years, I started when YouTube was maybe at its peak or more about long form videos.
Mhm.
I was able to rediscover all the old Motley Crue videos and Poison videos, more of the theatrical, over the top kind of 80s bands.
Mhm.
And when you're 13, 15, it's pretty impressionable.
Mhm.
So, as a big Kiss fan, that's basically what followed up Kiss, right? 70s were all about Kiss. The 80s was pretty much Motley Crue leading the charge on what was in,
Mhm.
and for sure influenced. But it's not that different from Kiss, and Kiss is a huge part of my life.
Right.
So um, hard to deny as a drummer that Tommy Lee is an unnoticeable figure, and the drummers that had stick tricks that followed up their playing, it was a very it kind of clicked with me of I could be as the best drummer I could be, but I could also add in the flash of these stick tricks, and how can I kind of merge the musicianship with the show? And that has always been my sort of go-to.
Got you. So you mentioned Tommy Lee, and there's this clip of Tommy. It's from a longer interview that I've seen many, many times. I think it's Sammy Hagar that's interviewing him, and he's saying, Tommy, like you're like in the on the drum kit way in the back, and you strike me as somebody that like wants to be more in the front and have a little bit more attention. Do you feel like that's part of it for you, or is it purely like the entertainment value of adding the tricks?
I definitely feel like I'm a lead singer that fell into the drum kit.
Okay.
I want all the attention on me on the stage at all times possible, but it's not. I never view it as an ego thing.
Yeah.
Ego is fine on the stage. It's when it's off stage that it can become a problem. But the point is, for me, I'm trying to put on the best show that I can. And I know that doing stick tricks, making faces, headbanging, huge drum sets, uh, crazy licks is a part of my what I enjoy
Hmm.
in seeing drummers. So if I can just take bits and pieces from all my favorites, I'll be my favorite drummer. It's meant to enhance. It's not meant to outshine. And I've told really every band I've been a part of, you're taking it the wrong way if you think I'm trying to take away from your thing or your moment.
Right.
I just want you to look back at me and go, all right, I guess I got to step it up now. And it's supposed to lift everyone. And
Yeah.
I think in the bands I've been a part of, it has always done that because we're all on the same, we all share a same brain in that way.
Hmm.
But some people don't understand that.
Yeah. Do you ever take gigs, let's say as a session musician, or maybe not a session musician, but like as a touring musician on a gig where it's really not about you, where you do have to sort of like wear a ponytail and like dress down, or do you tend to really just favor the gigs that are really you and allow you to express yourself in the way you just explained?
I've been very fortunate to sustain a life of gigs that have, I feel like, been all, if not parts of me,
Hmm.
and hasn't forced me to compromise what how I represent myself.
Hmm.
Um, I was auditioning for a country cruise ship gig, and I did ask what the dress code might be, and they, after getting confirmed that I could do the gig, they had mentioned, we might want to reconsider some of these aesthetic choices. And that wasn't, I didn't turn away from that for that
Right.
reason. I just simply, after thinking about it, just it wasn't the right gig. But I
Right.
have not had to. I mean, I'll wear a suit if I have to play a wedding.
Hmm.
Um, but the hair stays and the makeup stays. And quite honestly, this is always the case. Is I'll roll into a room. People who choose to judge will judge, and by the end of the night, they're your biggest fan,
Hmm.
and you open their mind to lawn-haired uh, rocker guy, simply because I just wear who I am on my sleeve and I do
Right.
what I do and I feel like I'm really good at it and it can in that way be infectious. Uh, it's hard to deny through like humanity if someone's really good at something, it's pretty infectious of
Mm.
the sort of animal in all of us of respecting that.
I do think authenticity comes through. I think it always does. I think especially people who are authentic themselves will see it in other people. Like you gravitate like in that sense. So how old were you when you started playing, and did you start with drums or did you start with singing or another instrument?
I was 5 years old when I got my first drum set, and it was Christmas of 2000, so 24 years ago.
Okay.
I had received a first drum set, and my dad sort of ushered my brother and I into the like Van Halen idea of one kid plays drums, the other kid plays guitar,
Hmm.
but let's also just throw stuff at them and see what sticks.
Hmm.
And we were introduced to Kiss at the same time, and it it was my father's a pretty good cheerleader about it. My mom was too. Like, hey, there's Peter Chris, that's the drummer guy. Like, that's pretty cool, huh?
Right.
Yeah, that is really cool. It's hard to deny a drummer who has a huge drum set, cool head of hair, uh, looks cool playing, and then at the end of a show rises uh, 50 feet in the air and all
Right.
that good stuff and sparks and fire. So when you're five, that's a pretty infectious bug to catch.
Hmm.
And now that's not to say at 5 years old, I'm playing good drums, but I'm hitting stuff and expressing myself as a 5-year-old would, which is just loud noise.
Hmm.
Entering into middle school is when it really more so got serious. So sixth grade is when I would say a shift happened.
And does this mean you were practicing more, that you had like the intention of starting a band?
Yeah, Guitar Hero came out at this time,
Hmm.
and that is a pretty huge generational thing for. us, not even just kids, as it culturally,
Yeah.
rock music's cool again. And parents can go, hey, I remember that song. But the kids go, I've never heard AC/DC in my entire life. But this is a really fun game. And yeah, at that time, I'm practicing more. I got into private lessons. I was able to join the school concert band. And through all of that, met a guitar player and a bass player. And we would play gigs at school, do the talent show circuit.
Mhm.
And it just kind of like one thing led to another is, I'm not really a sports guy.
Mhm.
I, at the time, liking comic books wasn't as big as it is right
Right,
now.
right.
So let's lean into music and reading books about Kiss and all of your heroes. You start to realize that they're cheerleaders and they're telling you that being a musician and a rock star is possible
Mhm.
if you work really hard. So I took that to heart and worked really hard and continue to work really hard to try and make my dreams come true.
That's amazing. So you had mentioned obviously Kiss and a few other bands. What are some of the other bands that you started getting into when you started really getting more serious and forming bands with your friends?
Rush is a big one. Dream
Mhm.
Theater is another huge influence. It's tough. I pretty much commit to a handful of things and I lean in heavy. I'd rather know a lot about a few things than a little about a lot of things. And that's just my personality. So I am like a Kiss encyclopedia, uh, or even Motley Crue for sure.
Yeah,
Um, but just the more theatrical bands.
right.
Nowadays, I'm more open minded to discovering music.
Mhm.
But growing up, it's Kiss, Van Halen, Motley Crue, Rush,
Gotcha.
and I'm familiar with a ton of other styles. It's
Right.
more just I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to it. And if a music video didn't look so appealing, it's like, well, I don't know. This LA Guns video is kind of boring right now. I'm going to go back to that Looks That Kill video. That was a pretty cool one. So,
Gotcha.
but nowadays it's listening to Black Veil Brides. They're an amazing band. Ghost is incredible.
Okay.
Avenged Sevenfold, and that's probably like the big three.
Yeah. Are you the person that would or like is more likely to go see the same band like 72 times rather than going to see 72 different bands, it sounds like? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm more hardcore about the bands I like than casual.
Yeah. I love the commitment.
Thank you.
I'm kind of like that too. I've seen a lot of bands, but if you look at my little concert ticket bowl, which is getting bigger and bigger each year, there's definitely like certain bands, like 3 or 4 bands that I've seen a lot. And I will spend all my money on them. So
Yeah.
I totally feel that. I get that. All right. So you have this really incredible, I'm going to use the word project, but perhaps band is the better word. So that's what we're going to learn about the next few minutes. But the band is called Idol. And you started working on it. I want to say it was in, let's see, I wrote it down somewhere. In around 2023, I want to say you guys started working on it conceptually. Is that right? Or was it 2022?
It would be 2022.
2022. Okay. Okay. So you started working on this project, and it is, for me, as somebody who experienced it recently, it is about the music, but it's just as much about the video. There's this incredible story that covers over seven songs or 7 videos, and there were some other elements about it as well. So let's start by saying, share the name of the project and tell me a little bit about what inspired you to go in this direction.
Okay, so band's called Idol, like you said. The concept album is titled The Vengeance.
Hmm.
And what inspired us to go this way, I was putting together a band in 2018, and I wanted it to be over the top. I wanted each member to feel like they were um, an equal in the band. Maybe not behind the scenes, it can't always be that way, but visually, you certainly can. There doesn't have to be one person who's bigger in the front of the picture, and then the rest of us are all small in the back. So I had spitballed, what if we're superheroes? And that's not a surprise to any Kiss fans. They turned into superheroes. But what if right out of the gate we're a superhero band and maybe something like The Watchmen, where it's a little more real life. Each guy could have powers, if we so choose. I'm not really a superhero fan of heroes who have powers per se. I'm pretty committed to Batman, where he's just a guy who works really hard to
Mhm.
and is a little crazy, but uh, and for a minute it was considered, and then it got vetoed, and I held on to the idea. So fast forward, it's 2022. And I have a notebook, and I'm trying to just brainstorm for some personal drum solo ideas. And I wrote comic book drum solo. Could be cool, a cool kind of theme. And I like to run a lot, so I'm going on these runs, and I'm just thinking through this batch of ideas, and it just kind of clicked one day that a band that I had with my musical best friends in 20 to all through high school, and it ended in 2016. We had shifted a few different lanes and landed on writing instrumental music.
Mhm.
And we had written two really solid songs. And I would every so few years go back and listen to them for the nostalgic purpose.
Mhm.
But around this time I thought, this one song could be a hero theme, and this other song strikes me as a villain theme. So I reached out to the guys and I said, how do you feel about maybe doing like an EP?
Mhm.
It would be really great to see these songs through, because at the time they were complete. We just didn't know how to package it, and we had no money to distribute it or anything like that. I didn't know what I was doing. So learned a thing or two over the years, and they were on board, and it quickly evolved into like, let's write a whole album and let's do it this way. And that is definitely the seed of the band.
Cool. And it's three members. It's you and two other guys. All right.
Yeah. We're the masterminds. We'll hire out if we need an extra part performed on an instrument that we're not capable of playing, but
Right.
it's the three of us.
Right. So we saw you throw out the 7 videos that make up the story. And there were also, you also had like at least one of the songs had like a saxophonist and like violinist in that. So those are like the people that you would pull in as needed for the band or for any project that you guys work on.
Correct. And it was really great. The idea is going over the top, and it was really cool to have a lot of the people who recorded on the album also be present for the videos
Mhm.
and create the illusion that there is this band, for the video's sake, right? For the story's sake.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. And their name is, correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob Popowski and Nicholas Fronte.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And they played Shadow 1 and Shadow 2 in
Yeah.
the story rather. So what I thought was really cool about this is that, like I said, you had videos, obviously there's music. I think there was a comic book element, which I didn't actually participate in that part. Tell me a little bit about that, about those visuals.
For sure. We're all nerds
Hmm.
in our own way. We all three collectively enjoy Batman probably the most as any hero. So, and grew up watching the animated series from the 90s.
Hmm.
So that was a huge point of inspiration. But we also, it's kind of funny, right? Like the 90s were this weird abyss of old meets new.
Hmm.
And our parents grew up with daily comics and newspapers, the
Right.
cliffhanger, what's going to happen in the next paper.
Yeah.
And I don't know if today's generation has those sort of prehistoric uh, outlets for media, but thinking through how could we do this, I took a page from Black Veil Brides. They also released an album that told the story of a superhero. Funny enough, at the time that I was thinking of this idea, they put the album out, and it just was like, oh, come on, man, they beat us to it. Uh, However, ours is told in a very, very different way. They are telling of a superhero where we are the main characters.
Hmm.
Um, but kind of seeing how they did their videos, it was 4 videos in a story,
Hmm.
which I thought was super neat. And you really did feel, if you're a hardcore fan, that you're waiting for the next video. What's going to happen? What are they going to show? And I thought they did a dynamite job in making each video feel like a different sort of comic book element.
Mhm.
where it could be like a Joel Schumacher movie, or it could be an animated movie, and one could be a Christopher Nolan film, and the other was a Matt Reeves film.
Right.
So all these different styles. I thought, well, that's really cool for the casual fan, but what if someone is really into like the comic book element? And that's where these dailies came in of, why don't we tell the story through Polaroid pictures, 2 pages a week in between each release. And that way there's, nowadays you need content. So we have content,
Mhm.
and it also is just a fun way, new thing to show the story. I've never seen another band do this.
Mm.
And maybe I'm mistaken. And especially also telling comics or telling a story through Polaroid photography. I thought that was pretty unique, and boy, was it a challenge.
It's a
But
lot of work you put into that. It's
yeah,
clear. Yeah.
a lot of film. But I think it really shows, if you hung with it, the
Mhm.
labor of love shined through. And that was really the point. There's casual fans.
Mhm.
Stick with the videos. But if you're hardcore and you want to know about Q Michael K, you want to know about Josephine Red or Conrad Dickard, there's a comic book page to tell you more about how we got from this video to that video,
Right.
more in depthly. So
And let me take just a step back, because for people who are fans of yours, they're going to know this, especially the people who really followed every moment of this. But for the folks who didn't, the main story, it's about a jazz musician who's been done dirty by his manager. And the story, there's a whole story that goes beyond that, that digs much deeper. But what was really cool is that you released the 7 videos that make up the story. The first one came out, I believe, in last year, December. And then like 2 months later, roughly 2 months later for each one, we got a new video and a new part of the story. And as you mentioned, there was in between moments with the comics. Did you feel that for your main, like your most hardcore fans, did you feel the excitement building? Did you see conversation about what's the story about, as the first one comes out and as it built? Did you feel that excitement from the fans?
absolutely not.
Oh no, no.
uh, and that is not a dig on anyone who has kept up with me. I think it's incredibly difficult nowadays to start a new band, and let alone a band about some superhero. Uh, we definitely were hoping for the moon, and we landed in the stars,
Mhm.
but I could give less of a hoot if people were into it or not. I've made peace with the fact that, commercially speaking, uh, as far as my brand goes, jazz music is definitely not something you would anticipate me uh, performing.
Right.
You definitely wouldn't expect me to have slick back hair and then sing as a crooner
Mhm.
jazz musician.
Right. Which
Wouldn't.
happens in the first part.
Yeah, the first 2 videos are that. And as much as a sort of, what's the word? Like a clickbait moment as I was hoping that would be, it really
Mm.
didn't transpire.
Mhm.
Um, a couple people, but it didn't really catch fire in the way that we were all hoping it would. And it very quickly we realized, okay, this is going to take time, and this is maybe a flavor of the day type of thing, or whatever the case is.
Mhm.
And I don't really care. I That's the point of art. The point of art is to make exactly what you want, and if people like it,
Mhm.
that's cool. I'm sure people would argue with me on that point, but that has always been my mantra. I don't care what people think. I don't care what people have to say. I am making what I want to make. And if you're into it, great, get on the ride. And if you're not, that's fine,
Right.
but you're probably missing out.
So,
So that was kind of the unfortunate shame. But um, I my argument the whole time was, let's do this
yep.
as right as we can. I'm not a millionaire. I am a money is not in my family, or I'm not rich. So the point is, with the incomes that we have, let's do as quality of content as we can, because it will be cemented in the internet and the World Wide Web forever. People
Right.
can always rediscover it.
Yeah.
And especially in today's age, we are realizing that more and more is how does a 16-year-old know who this is? Or how did they even find this? How is it that this artist is now bigger than they were back then?
Yeah.
And it just is the way life is right now.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two thoughts that I had to what you had to say. One is that, there could be something that you do in the future where it piques people's interest on such a level that they need to go back and see every last thing that you did. And I think over the years, we've found that a lot of albums or even TV shows did not do well in the beginning. Like they didn't get the interest that they deserved. But then maybe 5 years later, they became the biggest thing in the world, or 20 years later, or 30 years later, because something else happened later that piqued people's interest and made them value the artist or the program or whatever it was. The other thing, though, is I do think that we live in binge culture. And I'm somebody who grew up watching a TV show every single week, and I still like that. I like live television. It's just for me, I take some sort of comfort in knowing that I'm watching, The Price is Right at the same time as everybody else, at least on the East Coast. And even though it's the same show, if you record it and watch it, 3 months later, it's still the same show, but for some reason I had that value. That being said, when I watch something on like a Netflix or, some sort of streaming service like that, there are moments where I'm like, as excited as I am for the show, maybe I could just wait 10 weeks and just binge it. And that's how I actually that's how I experienced them. I just watched them one right after the other after the other. I didn't have to remember anything because I had just experienced it. Or if I needed to go back, I knew exactly, oh, it was the end of that one. Let me just look at that again. Oh, that did happen. So I wonder if when all of the video, which really just happened more recently, because I think it was over the span of the year, when that final one came, did you find that there was a bit of a different response of people going, oh, I watched all seven, very cool story?
No, actually,
So we're still waiting for the
yes,
build. Yeah.
and this is not a slight on anyone. I'm not upset
Yeah.
with the general population or anyone who has known me for not getting it. It's a
Yeah.
weird thing.
It's a
Uh,
concept. It's a concept
yes, and
project. It really is.
I just say weird in general,
Yeah.
right? It's a commitment, and look, some people aren't into comic books, and
Yeah.
that's cool too. Some people aren't into instrumental soundtrack type music. Totally get it. Some people don't like jazz. Some people just want straight up rock music.
Yes.
I was met more with, yeah, man, I really like that last song. So, like, why did you put out that Christmas song? And getting from A to Z didn't really happen.
Yeah.
And I would again, it's like you just got to go back and try and binge the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's what we were kind of psyching ourselves up with is we can't wait for the right people to go back and just go down and go through, like comb through everything and sort of try to understand and piece it together and see where the story takes
Yeah.
1 through 7.
Right. I will say this, it's still really fresh. You really just put out, I mean, as of the recording of this interview, which will probably come out a little while after we record it, you really just put out the seventh bit. So the whole story is just kind of fresh and new. I do think that there is an audience for this, and I do think your audience will find you. And here I'll tell MetalNet family and anybody else who might be watching this why they should watch the seven videos, why they should binge them. I thought, well, it was a great story, first of all. It was clear, just the amount of work you guys put into, because we do see the Polaroids within the context of the seven videos. There's a moment where we get to experience those as well. And there was a lot of work and a lot of love, that's clear. But for me, just the musical journey alone was really cool. Now, I do think it starts with jazz music because the story is about a jazz musician. And I think that maybe if you're like a straight metalhead or whatever, that maybe that's like not your thing. But I think anybody who takes the journey from 1 to 7, it starts off jazzy. I took notes. It starts off like upbeat and jazzy. And then as things happen, as life happens to this character, bad things that should never happen to anybody, we move into music that gets like a little bit more sullen. And then it gets like really heavy and aggressive to what I would call metal. Like I would straight up call it metal. Maybe some people would call it heavy rock, but I would call it metal. And then you have some really great metal moments. And I will tell you that for me, it was like, I have little hearts on 4, 5, and 7. So those were my moments. But it works through the story, but the story to me, I feel like even if you just listen to the album and you don't, and I'm a video person, I grew up with MTV, so I like the visuals just like you do. But I feel like if you listen to the album straight through, you understand what's happening in this character's life just by the tone, just by the musical choices that are made. And so I think that is phenomenal. When you watch the video, you get that and the story as well. And then you just go from this. I don't want to give away too much because I really want people. One of the things in modern life is that before you go to a movie, you've already seen the best parts of it because they're all in the promos, and that sucks, right? So it's very few times in life where you get to really experience something theatrical from A to Z without knowing too much about it. But we do start off jazzy and we do get to that like metal place. And I definitely have favorite songs in it, but I really loved the story. I love that there was just a little bit of text under the videos so that you would know the name of the characters, which you may or may not know. I think your character is the only ones where we see the name uh, in the video a few times, but you might not know the characters otherwise. Obviously, the stuff you put out in between, but I think the musical journey was fantastic, and I think
Think
theatrically it's beautiful. And I think anybody who, like myself, is into like the Alice Coopers and the Rob Zombies and the Kisses, and I think would really enjoy this if they just take the minute to sit down and just enjoy them one at a time because you get to binge them now. You don't you don't have to have patience, which most of us sorely lack, right?
totally. And I will say too, it's thank you, by the way. And thank you as well for noticing the tonal shifts that happened within the music. That was purposeful.
Hmm.
And the reason why you have such a stark difference of why is jazz and a breakdown on the same record. Uh, there's it's because of there's no way that a happy-go-lucky person sonically would be really be represented with a breakdown. It just doesn't make sense. But an angry person who has a vendetta uh,
Yes.
needs a breakdown. So,
And I love a
but
good vendetta. Can I just tell you, I love a good vendetta story, which is
yeah,
probably why it spoke to
don't
me.
we all? Don't we
Yeah.
all?
And I
But I
mean, one
did
of the
want to
songs is called The Vengeance. So I'm like in.
totally. I did want to say I think it's tough because it's the first origin, right? You're
Hmm.
trying to explain all these characters. No one cites the first Batman comic as probably the greatest comic story of all time.
Right.
But now I'm probably going to eat my words. It is because it's so culturally a part of the fabric that we
Hmm.
live in now. But for a new thing, I think if we do when we do a part two, uh, we can tell a more succinct superhero story.
Hmm.
You don't need to know why the hero's this way or that way, who all these because there's really two origin stories that happen. You have the hero origin story and then the villain origin story. And there just quite frankly is a lot of information to keep up with. So I think when we can tell a more succinct just story
Hmm.
about superhero from start to finish, then maybe it'll catch fire a little more. But again, I am not upset with the response we got. It will be there forever. So
It will.
whenever anyone's ready for it, it's there.
Yeah.
Uh, but I got to make exactly what I wanted to without anyone telling me no
Right.
or having to really compromise on anything. And I think any artist would agree that that is one of the greatest achievements is feeling like you fully put yourself on the canvas, so to speak.
Hmm.
And that's what it's all about.
No, I'm totally with you on that because if even if you look at the biggest bands, and I'm talking specifically in the rock and metal world, like forget about everybody else. I think there was really the beauty of that world is that people really in their early days sold albums one album at a time, like out of the trunk of their cars, playing crappy shows where like there's nobody there but your grandma, or like maybe there's three people. And I do think that's why like the metal world and like the hard rock world is such a community because you're really all in it together, like, whether it's the creative part or whatever, but it's really one at a time. Because when I first got into these bands specifically, I was into music long before that. But when I first got into these bands, they were a lot of them were the baby bands. Like Poison was putting out their first album, Cinderella was putting out their first album, but they had really earned their way, right? Like they had played those crappy clubs. They weren't like, the stereotypical pop star that gets discovered and somehow magically makes an album and ends up on Rolling Stone. and none of us really know how. They really earned their way, but when I got in, they kind of blew up right at that moment, and they were playing these huge stadiums. But when I would go to those shows, I was actually a bit frustrated. I loved it. I loved them playing these huge stadiums. It was amazing. The energy was amazing. But it was also frustrating because I'd see kids from school who I knew like really weren't that into it, who abandoned it all like the minute it stopped being cool, and then picked it up again 30 years later when it was like the nostalgia tours, you know? And I always found that frustrating because I'm just as happy being in a small venue with other diehards, and it's just us. So all of that is to say that I think you and I have similar philosophies. Like I would love MetalNet to be huge, but it needs to be huge with the right people, right? It needs to be people who actually care about the conversation, who actually care about the community, who actually care about the bands, not a bunch of trolls who come in, just leave nasty comments for the sake of attention seeking. So I'm with you. You got to build the thing that you're really sincere about. And I really do think people will find this. And it might not be as soon as anybody would like it to be, but I do think people will find it because it is a cool project. It's beautifully executed. The music is fantastic. We get to hear you sing. You actually sing on it. And I think for me, the last song, Afterglow, felt actually like it could be very much a standalone in the sense that it felt like more like a traditional music video, even though it very much fit in the sequence. But I felt like that was a standalone because it was a great song. I think it was probably the most dynamic, at least to my ear. And it could just be a standalone where somebody could just hear it and spread the word, and like that's the song, and then people go, oh wait, that's a part of something, like I didn't even know, I just thought it was a really cool song and a really cool video. But I think it's a beautiful project. But I think the reason it translates is because I think there's a lot of sincerity and a lot of heart and a lot of like blood, sweat, and tears in it, and I'm all about that. Like,
Thank you.
yeah, like I don't need the quick and dirty. I want like the real deal. So I'm really excited to have you on, and I do wish that people found it, but they will. It's still new.
Yeah. This
Brand
is
new.
not a sob story interview, by
It
the
is
way.
not
This
at
is
all. No, and it's not
I
coming
just
across
I
that way at all.
no, and I speak the truth because so many of these interviews are laced with the who's the great and powerful Oz, right? This classic rock star thing. Who is the man behind the curtain? And I've always enjoyed interviews that gave me something, gave me knowledge.
Mm,
I teach drums as like a jobby job.
hmm
I'm not there to show you how great I am. I'm there to teach you what I know and
mm,
pass on knowledge because you don't know the domino effect that will take place. So
right.
by being brutally honest with, no, I don't think a lot of people really understood it and got into it, but here's why is
Mm,
important. And it's important to show the next generation that, hey, don't be afraid to make the art you want to make. And don't be upset if it doesn't go viral. We're too
right.
caught up in a viral nation. And don't get me wrong, Peaches, like we talked about in the beginning, I'm so happy that it went viral. That is a great feeling.
Right.
Um, Me doing a hairspray drum solo went viral, 1.5 million views. That's a really cool feeling.
Mm,
Uh, but what does it get you tomorrow?
right.
Not a ton,
Mm.
usually. Um, put in honest work and create honest art, because you're the person that has to sell it. It's hard to sell something that is not 100% you.
So, Quinton, what do we have to look forward to in 2025?
For 2025, a few goals are to continue touring with Halocene. There's a spring tour and then a summer European tour that I will probably be a part of.
Cool.
And that will be very incredible. Um, I would like to do another drum solo,
Mhm.
which I'm very passionate about. And I'd like to do a dual drum cover or two. And what a dual drum cover is when myself and another guest drummer get together, we shred a cover, and we figure out a spot in that cover to have a drum conversation, a drum off, so to speak, and have it seamlessly flow from one part to the other, but just kind of plop it in and let the drums shine, let a cool drum kit be seen, hit all the stuff. And
All things.
yes, and I'd like to do one, if not two or three of those.
So you had mentioned earlier in the conversation, maybe this isn't a 2025 thing because it took you a couple years to get it out, but you did mention another, like a next album with Idol. Would that be a continuation of the story that we just experienced, or is every album going to be a fresh new story? Or do we not even know the answer to that yet?
A couple different ideas have entered our minds. One is doing an EP that focuses on how maybe the main character, who is titled the Silver Shadow
Mhm.
and alias is Q Michael K, is feeling after the ending of the Vengeance story, and maybe doing 3 songs on what that would be. We have in depthly talked about a continuation of the story, um, and what that might be. More so, it's kind of like how we're in a climate where superhero movies, it's Batman, right? But then he is always facing off a different foe.
Right.
It's that type of idea of, okay, who's a new foe or 2 foes, a femme fatale that we could introduce, and what would that story look like?
Mm.
While maybe having some callbacks to what happened in the Vengeance. We're trying to make it as cinematic as possible
Right.
and really go over the top, because as far as any like local bands go, I haven't seen that done. I think it's pretty ballsy, and healthy competition never hurt anybody. So it's not a competition of all these local bands. Like I gotta duke it out with them. It's just more speaking realistically here.
Like upping your own game.
Yeah. And kind of just looking at the musical landscape, like, wow, blow some minds with this, or at least feels that way. And we're not trying to really impress anyone but ourselves, but it's nice to get approval from others too, and
Yeah.
put your mark on Milwaukee or Nashville. So I think for 2025, I'd like it to be more about drum solos, dual drum cover videos. Let's tour, and in the gaps of free time, we can work towards the next idol thing, and really feel like we are putting out something that's better than what we just did, and learning from mistakes and
Right.
seeing how we can improve.
Sounds good. Well, I will tell everybody at home that they should definitely check out the story. The 7 videos are available on your YouTube channel, which is at the band Idol, as well as your Instagram. Is your Facebook also at the band Idol?
Unfortunately, Facebook is at Idol the Band.
At Idol the band. But I definitely recommend to everybody that they do it. I think the whole journey is under 50 minutes.
Yes,
Yeah. So it doesn't take a very long, but it's very satisfying musically as well. And I want to thank you, Quinton, for coming on and taking time. And we hope to have you on again soon.
I hope so too. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you for focusing on Idol. That really means a lot. And I hope the next interview that we have, we can talk about more of Idol or whatever is going on. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Quinton Kufahl. Make sure that you're subscribed to MetalNet TV. Please give this video a thumbs up and leave a really nice comment for Quinton or for me. I will see you next week with another new video. Take care.